do. 5, 12. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Got a good group here for review. That's nice. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Wrong class. Ah. There we go. Okay. Okay, very good. Let's get this party started, and I'll just let folks in as they kind of straggle in here. So we are here. We are week 7. And I kind of talked about what's happening for the rest of the course last week, but just to reiterate, you have your midterm quiz next week. And I have, let's take a look at that really quick, because I'm pretty sure what I did was opened it for the week. Let's see what we got here. So yeah, it's available on March 1st, and it's due. So that's Monday of next week. And it's due on Friday at 11:59 p.m. Okay. So it will be 30 questions. It's not quite done yet, so ignore that. It'll be 30 questions, and you have an hour to do it. So it should be pretty simple. So you can access it at any point during next week and take it, and it'll just be, whenever you open it, you have an hour to finish it. So I think 60 minutes should be plenty of time to answer a few basic questions. Nothing too terribly sophisticated, because we have roughly 6 weeks of material divided into 30 questions. There's only about 5 questions per week. So I can't really drill down too deeply, and I don't really want to. Like I say, this is a quiz based on just getting a basic assessment of where you're at. It's not a quiz that is designed to qualify you in any way or make any sort of determination about your readiness to be a writer or anything of that nature. It's simply an accounting of what we've covered over the last 6.5 weeks. And, should be fairly simple to get through at this point.
So is this based on reading and stuff and etc.?
Yeah, whatever's in the outline, and your outline, I've been updating the outline as we go in web courses. So the outline that's there should concur with the outline I'm showing you today. So yeah, but like I said, I'm not looking for there's no trick questions, in other words, and there's no deep analytical questions that are, that require familiarity with the medium and then interpretation of information. It's not that kind of test. It's just basically,
And will
were
there
you
be
here?
any,
Were you present? Did you do the reading like you were asked to do, or did you blow it off? If you blew it off, you might miss a simple question, but if you did the work, then I think you're gonna be totally fine.
and will there be specific questions about any of the examples? So I can't think of a good example.
Why don't we do the review, and then afterwards, if there's
Okay.
something that we didn't cover, we can cover that at the end. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, good. So I'm going to start off with week 1. So what were we doing in week 1? In week 1, we had our intro class, which is kind of a freebie. But you were introduced to the bookshelf, and you were given a reading assignment. It was chapter 1 from The Art of Dramatic Writing from La Huchagri. And that reading, if you recall, was about premise. What premise is, why it's important to story. And then I gave you a script notes PDF also, which was covering the concept of premise. So the takeaway from the week 1 class, the Tuesday class, would have been, did you check out the bookshelf? Have you been doing the readings from the bookshelf? Because each week I was giving you a reading from the bookshelf. You should be able to tell me basically what each one of these books offers you in terms of a writing aid, a reference aid. For instance, if I asked you, if you were working on an antagonist for a story that you were writing, which book would you go to or turn to if you needed some ideas about how to structure that antagonist? Which book would you choose?
Master characters.
Yeah. Right. So, and if you had, for instance, let's say you were thinking about story structure, and you wanted to reference specifically the hero's journey, what book or books might you use to access the hero's journey concept?
Story structure architect.
And the Vogler.
I would go with the writer's journey, Vogler, because he specifically references it. And then, of course, I gave you the hero's journey on the bookshelf. I gave you the Joseph Campbell volume that covers his theory of the hero's journey. The story structure architect is similar, but it is taking the Georges Polti 36 dramatic situations theory and expanding it to 55. And the differentiation between the Polti research and what Dr. Schmidt is talking about is the addition of female story structures. So Dr. Schmidt took the 36 initial structures from Polti, and by association, Gozi, and combined 10 of them to make a total of 26 masculine story structures from the traditional study, and then added 28 more female-based story structures and combined them all into 55 suggested scenarios. Okay, so, and that's different from 20 master plots in that here she's talking about basic plot structure, and over here we're talking about things that are relating to characters' inner and outer journeys and things of that nature. So it's a little bit more complex. But if we're just talking about the traditional hero's journey, which is at the very minimum a fundamental study structure for writers in Hollywood, you could access that verbatim from the hero's journey, or you could go to Chris Vogler and look at his writer's journey. Okay. It's pretty obvious what writing dazzling dialogue is all about, and I've given you one reading assignment from there. Writing TV drama is a little bit different volume. I gave you a couple of reading assignments out of here. One of them was the basic structure of a writing environment in a professional position like Hollywood. It goes into a greater amount of detail about behind the scenes aspects of working as a writer for a studio, for instance. There's a great deal of information there about the business of being a writer, which isn't necessarily what these other volumes are discussing. Okay, so if you wanted to know questions about the structure of TV versus the structure of theatrical screenwriting, or the conditions through which you would be a writer in a writer's pool or in a writer's room for a TV series, or if you wanted to know the basic the key points in the evolution of a script for television, in other words, from the concept to the pitch process to the purchase and contract process to the writing process and then the physical production, you'd see more of that information in this book by Douglas. Okay, you've had Poetics by Aristotle before, so you should know the value in that, basic story structure from the traditional Greek classics, and that all drama is based on beginning, middle, and end, which is the foundation of the 3-act structure. So you've had this before. And then if you had a question about how to format an insert shot in your script, or if you had a question about the applicability of direction in parentheticals, where would you look? Which book would you check for that?
The Blue Book of Grammar or Grammar Rules or the Screenwriter's Bible.
Certainly the Screenwriter's Bible, but the Blue Book on Grammar is not going to tell you anything about final draft formatting.
Mhm.
Okay, the Blue Book on Grammar is strictly grammar in the general sense, as applied to a variety of different written texts. So the Blue Book on Grammar is specific about your phonics and your punctuation and your subject verb agreement and your, you know, adjectives and adverbs and all of that business. The Screenwriter's Bible is specifically going to tell you this is how you write an insert or a series of shots in your screenplay, or this is when you should use parentheticals to suggest action and when you should seek another way to, you know, to describe what's happening. So the Screenwriter's Bible is very specific to script draft formatting. Okay. And then Grammar Rules is fairly self-explanatory, I think. The Lahush-Egri book is a little bit more conceptual. It deals with premise, it deals with character development, and it deals a little bit with dialogue. And then we defer to Scott Bell for you know, an extended conversation on dialogue for film and television. So that would be you know, a basic understanding of what all these books are doing for you on the bookshelf. Okay. And that's the extent of what I need you to know. I need you to understand that if you're stumped and you have a question about format, about structure, about character development, about, you know, when to use Oxford commas, or about how to structure a series of shots as an insert in a screenplay, that you know which book to go to for that answer, and that you have accessed these books before. That's the point about that whole thing. In the very beginning of the semester, I expressed a meme from the industry, I guess you'd call it a meme, that represents the prevailing wisdom concerning the hierarchy of screenwriting versus acting and performance versus physical production versus post-production. And the notion was that content in its encapsulated form, the whole process is the king, but content from this point of view is really what I'm talking about is story is king. Okay. And we also talked about from Julius Epstein, his take on the 3-act structure. So if story is the most important thing you can have in Hollywood, without it, you don't really have a movie. A good story is worth its weight in gold. And what's that story based on? Well, it could be something as simple as a 3-act structure, which is get your hero up in a tree, throw rocks at the hero, and then get the hero out of the tree. And that was his essential analysis of both Aristotle's Poetics and about the 3-act story structure as it's traditionally described by people like Pete Russell. Lahush-Egri in your reading talked all about premise. And the idea is that premise is a proposition, and it is supposed through antecedents, or it's proved, in other words, using antecedents. The basis of an argument is the premise, and the proposition stated or assumed as leading to the conclusion. And that's a lot of words that are basically describing things like theme, goal, or inner journey. Okay. So I don't know if any of you have taken philosophy as part of your general education requirement. Have you guys taken like philosophy 1? I took that as part of my degree program, and I loved that class. And we did a whole section on argument, the structure of argument, the validity and the invalid supposition of an argument, how it's structured, what antecedents are, what conclusions are, what premises are. And that's really a direct correlation to what, Agri is talking about, I think. The difference being Agri is applying that logical analysis to story structure and character arc, whereas in philosophy, we were applying that basic structure to all arguments, whether they were legal, philosophical, or dramatic. So I think that if you've had that philosophy course, that you benefit immensely from having that discussion, and then following that up with a little bit of Lahush Egri, because it really kind of cements it, if you ask me. But if I asked you, give me some, give me another word for premise, you could very well say theme, goal, or perhaps character's inner journey. Objective, maybe instead of journey. Theme, goal, or objective. And objective and goal are kind of the same thing, really. Although goal could be an overarching theme, and then objective could be a specific kind of goal. So as long as you understand that this is what we're basically talking about, I think you're going to be okay. I talked about a couple of different story structures over the semester so far. The first one that I illustrated for you was Vogler's hero's journey, sort of superimposed over 3-act structure. So you could kind of see where the fundamental breaks are in the stages of story. Okay. And then the stages of the hero's journey, starting with the ordinary world and ending with the return with the elixir. And I asked you basically to describe elixir and understand elixir as a metaphor. So if I asked you, what is elixir a metaphor for, you could give me a handful of answers. What would one of them be?
A solution to the problem that sort of set them on the journey in the first place.
It could perhaps be the fundamental solution. It could also be I know there's more folks here in class than Ben, so why doesn't somebody else take a crack at this? What else could the elixir represent, folks? Someone take a stab at it.
The elixir could be knowledge.
It could be hidden knowledge, could be secret knowledge. It could be wisdom gained through experience. What else could the elixir be? Think of the low-hanging fruit here. What else could the elixir be? If it's not sacred knowledge, and if it's not the plan for resolution, what else could it possibly be?
It could be a tool at the character's disposal.
Yeah, it could be an artifact. It could be a physical artifact. It could be the Grail. It could be Excalibur. It could be Thor's hammer. It could be, a secret helmet with power. Okay, the elixir is a metaphor for all of these things, and you sort of decide, through the structure of your story, how you want the hero to reach their objective or realize their goal. Whether it's think of Indiana Jones, right? His elixir would have been coming home with the Ark of the Covenant, right? He still comes home with the elixir, but it's a knowledge gained through the seeking of the arc that was really ultimately more important to him than the actual arc itself, right? So, yeah, okay. What was Luke Skywalker's elixir?
Was it the Force?
The Force, right? The Force being with him, right? So in the beginning of the movie, he has no idea what the Force is. And then he's introduced to the concept of the Force. And then he's introduced to he has his meeting with the mentor, which is part of the Vogler / Campbell stages of dramatic evolution, right? He has a meeting with the mentor, and the mentor explains the Force to him. And then the mentor takes on the role of teacher and starts teaching him about the Force, right? But something has to happen in the process being a an outsider or a Gentile or a non-believer or an unknowing party or participant to an apprentice, to being, a practicing practitioner, to mastering a craft, a discipline, a theory, or a concept, right? And so Luke Skywalker has an arc through the whole movie, right? He goes from, I don't know what you're talking about, to using the Force as a master of that power to destroy the Death Star. So he was definitely on the hero's journey. And his return with the elixir wasn't gold and reward like Han Solo's notion of elixir was going to be. His idea of elixir was he now knew what the Force was, he understood how it worked, and he had some idea of how to control it, at least in a basic sense of the word. So he was definitely on the hero's journey. Okay. What else can we talk about? Let's see. So Vogler does a really good job, and he gives you some sense of in which act these stages of the hero's journey are likely to occur. So in Act 1, we have Ordinary World, which is establishing the setting. Then we have the call to adventure, right? If you're going to come with me to Alderaan and learn the ways of the Force, you're going to have to sell your land speeder, right? And Luke says, I'm not going to Alderaan, but I can take you as far as Mos Eisley, and you can catch a ride to wherever you're going from there. This is while he's meeting with his mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And you could argue that he has another mentor in the form of Han Solo. Han Solo maybe represents an older version of Luke Skywalker in his unrefined state of being, right? Han Solo is still the swashbuckling mercenary smuggler with no spiritual drive or spiritual motivation. And Luke was kind of that way in the beginning, right? All he really wanted to do was go to the academy and become a stormtrooper, because he was going to go to the Imperial Academy. So all he really wanted to do was have adventures by going to the Imperial Academy and then becoming a member of the Imperial, Force, military elite, whatever you want to call it. And so Han Solo arguably is also a mentor in this situation. Then he crosses the threshold, right? His step parents are killed. He commits to the quest, and he crosses the threshold by going to Mos Eisley with Ben, recruiting the Millennium Falcon, and hauling ass to Alderaan, right? And then tests of allies and enemies. Solo is tested. He could have turned him in when he found out that the Imperial troops were looking for these guys, but he didn't. He took them on as charter, and took them to Alderaan anyway. So his loyalty was tested. The Empire was sort of discovered as an enemy now, at least by Luke and by Han Solo. I think Ben Kenobi already knew that the Empire was looking for him, so he's maybe the only one who wasn't surprised by their need to blast their way out of Mos Eisley, and the fact that they were pursued by TIE fighters and taken to the Death Star. Approaching the innermost cave is more of a spiritual transition for a character. It's not as obvious for Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, although you could say that their period in the Death Star was a confrontation with the psyche in the philosophical cave, because that's where Ben is subdued by Vader, and Luke has to learn how to grieve and how to let go of that valuable mentor figure in his life, and he has to reestablish his commitment to learning the Force without his initial mentor. You could argue that is the innermost cave. It's more obviously reflected in The Empire Strikes Back when he goes into the tree and he confronts himself as the visage of Lord Vader indicating that he has a yin and a yang, a good and a bad side, you know, in terms of the Force, and that it could go either way for him, and that there was a strong precedent and temptation for him to follow the dark side. And so his spiritual journey, the peril of his spiritual journey, is keenly defined in his trip through the tree, which is possessed with the dark side of the Force. The ordeal itself is, you know, in the first chapter, breaking away from the Death Star, getting back to the rebel base, gearing up and attacking the Death Star directly. Okay. Reward comes when they return the princess to the rebel base. The road back, first they have to destroy the Death Star before they can take the road back. But in Luke's case, there really isn't a road back because he has finally arrived. There's a very interesting scene at the end of the movie when they're preparing to attack the Death Star, where Luke goes up and he greets somebody in an X-Wing fighter who he refers to as Biggs. And if you've read the novel Star Wars, then you'll understand that Biggs Darklighter was a significant character in the beginning of the story of Star Wars for Luke Skywalker specifically. Biggs Darklighter was one of his group of friends who grew up on Tatooine, one of the folks that he used to have T-16 races with and speeder races with. And Biggs was a little bit older than Luke and some of the other folks in Luke's group. And so Biggs left that group, and Biggs went to the academy, the Imperial Academy, and went on this journey that Luke was also wanting to go on. And in the process of Biggs' journey, he found the rebellion, and he crossed over and joined the rebellion. And when Luke arrives on Yavin to return the princess and to join the attack on the Death Star, he's reunited with Biggs Darklighter, who we have no idea from just the screenplay who Biggs was. We just know that, you know, he mysteriously knows who this guy is, but there's really no reference for it. You have to have had read the novel to understand who Biggs Darklighter was when they're gearing up the X-Wing fighters. So that's sort of the road back in a way, because he's reunited with an old friend who went out on his journey preceding Luke's, and then Luke caught up with him at some point and represents, you know, the homie, you know, this is my buddy from way back, you know. And then the resurrection, of course, comes when when Ben reveals himself as an ethereal aspect of the Force now that's going to guide Luke from the supernatural beyond. And he helps Luke, you know, use the Force to destroy the Death Star. And in this sense, he gains the elixir. And then he, instead of returning home to Tatooine, returns to Yavin and becomes a part of that community. So it's, you can apply this to pretty much any of your favorite movies, I think, if you really sit and analyze it and think about the events that are taking place in the order with which they take place. And you can apply Vogler's theory and Campbell's theory of the hero's journey onto the 3-act structure. Okay. That brought us you know, well into week 2. And in week 2, we kind of put the brakes on theoretical concepts and spoke about the pitch process. In other words, you got this great idea, you fleshed it out on paper. It's a story that you have tweaked, and it has good structure, you know, strong beginning, fulfilling ending, a robust middle where you have the hero's journey, you know, well ordered and designed within your story structure, within your plot. And then what do you do with this? What do you do with this thing, right? And so we talked about the pitch in the sense that you're going to find, or you're going to get access to a studio or a viable buyer of intellectual property. And you're going to pitch your idea to them and see if they want to fund your production or buy your story outright. Okay. And so that could be a Paramount studio exec. It could be an independent producer from a production company in Los Angeles, could be Netflix. Okay. the notion that you're going to take your idea to somebody who's going to represent financial assistance to you and your project. Okay. We talked about constructing a scriptwriter's Bible, and we're going to use documents that we learn about in the following weeks, 3 and 4, to assemble this overall script Bible and this pitch concept. So you had some research to do on the website Script Revolution, and also on the Studio Binder website specifically, there was a tutorial on how to write a pitch for TV featuring Judd Apatow. And in the chapters from Story Structure Architect and Writing the TV Drama Series, we looked at formatting in terms of content, not in terms of a script, but in terms of, in other words, how the 3-act structure applies to a television script versus a theatrical script, right? We focus mostly on TV for those conversations. The PDFs that you were assigned were how to write an elevator pitch, the TV show pitch template, which was a template that you use to create your own pitches, and then the show Bible template from Studio Binder. Week 2B, in other words, Thursday of that week, we had show structure, arc of the story, and the character's path. And we started talking about characters, what kinds of characters and what kinds of journeys are they on. We talked about the archetypes a little bit. There was some mention of the archetypes in the master character, 45 master characters volume. What are they? Can you define them? How do we use them? What are the supporting roles for your protagonist and your antagonist? And then talking about the various types of journeys we're going to put these people on. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the archetypes down here, but let me get through this first. I introduced you to the Screenwriter's Bible because also in week 2, I had you guys, if you didn't have screenwriting software already, I had you folks go to the Final Draft website and get a free version of Final Draft that you could use to create your documents with. The Screenwriter's Bible then is the ultimate companion to the Final Draft software in that it gives you all of the formatting structure, advice, specific applications, and keystrokes to use within Final Draft if the auto formatting function of Final Draft is not working for you. And there are some situations where the auto formatting can get kind of tripped up. Or there are things that you might do with your script. And a really good example is the insert series of shots, the sequence series of shots, or the insert shot. That is not an automatic formatting feature of Final Draft. So if you're going to have a scene where, you know, an actor is talking to another actor and the line is, I'll meet you at the coffee shop at 3 p.m. Let's synchronize our watches. And then we have an insert of somebody's watch face defining the actual time of day as 5 minutes after 2. If you want that shot to be in your action lines, you could list it as an insert. And there's a way to do that in the script formatting process. And the Screenwriter's Bible will tell you exactly how to do that. Okay. As far as the pitch process goes, I talked to you guys a little bit about Pitch Fest. This is a shot from Pitch Fest. I think it was in 2018, I think. Television show is an art form. Pitching is an art form, I should say. And there is it's not really a competition. It's more like a trade show, really. It's typically at the Los Angeles Convention Center downtown in LA. And you get upwards of 300-400 viable producers. In other words, folks that are in a position to buy. And they each have not a booth, but in this case, a table. And everybody goes around like speed dating. And you just go, you buy your ticket for access to the show. And then you start in the beginning and you snake your way through the entire show floor, and you speak to as many of these folks as possible, pitching them your ideas before the time is up. Okay, we talked about what a TV show pitch was. And in terms of a document now, and we know now that the notion of pitching is trying to convince somebody to buy your story or buy your script or fund your production. Okay, but what does the pitch consist of, right? So it's a comprehensive document that has several documents within its rudimentary structure. So you have the actual pitch document, which contains a log line, a rough outline, or a synopsis of your story. It may list the premise specifically of your story and the synopsis. It may list at least the description of the pilot episode, if not a number of episodes wrapped around the concept. And it could include a show Bible, a sample script, and it wouldn't be the entire script. It would be maybe a scene or something salient about the show or the series in general, a key scene, a key transitional scene for a character, for instance, probably from the pilot, that you can include as an example of not only your writing prowess, but also the tone of your story, the structure of your story, and an idea or a sense of who the characters are. So you also might have character dossiers in your pitch folder, your pitch volume. Okay. And then we talked about the series Bible. Okay. And the series Bible is beyond, it takes all the information from your script, or from your pitch file, and expands on it in all possible ways. Like there are in-depth character dossiers and discussions about backstory for characters. There are maps relevant to the story. There are glossaries, and there are things like documents that help you understand the world, understand the characters in context. Maybe it's they do this a lot, like in Tolkien, where they'll describe to you what a certain weapon is, what it was used for, who owned it, why it has magical properties, why it's important to the story, that kind of thing. Those types of documents are going to go into your series Bible. And then it's both concept in the series Bible, and it can also be documents from physical production if you're talking about a TV series, like and this would only happen once you were underway, but lighting diagrams, camera diagrams, information for special effects supervisors, post-production supervisors, like special development processes for film, or special coloration or CGI effects for digital cinema. There could be specific shooting information about, for instance, what lenses at what exposures, at what distances from subjects, what height from the floor are, the lenses used to capture certain scenes. I used to have to do that specifically for ILM on one TV series. It was the what the hell was it? We did the Mortal Kombat. I was responsible for the show Bible on Mortal Kombat, and if it was anything about camera specific data or information, or lighting specific data information, it was all compiled on worksheets that were put into the show Bible, and those were copied and they went right to post-production supervisors who were doing all the CGI for the TV show. So whether that was green screen plates, or there was anytime there was something with, I think it was Shao Kahn was the guy's name, lightning bolts and thunder and all that kind of stuff was all CG. All of that would have to be done for the show Bible, so that post-production knew exactly what we were doing in physical production, so they could create the right elements in the right kind of dimensions, right? It was the very beginnings of three-dimensional CGI concept. where you would want to know, for instance, what lens you were shooting on, because that lens has a certain perspective that translates to directions in something like Cinema 4D, for instance, or Cinema 3D. I did that on, gosh, for Industrial Light and Magic, I did that on the Lucasfilm we did in '92. It was Radioland Murders. So there were times when ILM wanted to know exactly how high off the floor a lens was and exactly how far away from the key actor or key element in the shot the camera was, so they could do in-camera effects, CGI effects mixed with live in-camera action, to get interactive CGI with live action going on in the same frame, in the same scene. So the show Bible has a lot of stuff in it. Okay. It's a very useful document, both in pre-production for planning, scheduling, budgeting, and then as a series is taking place, it's valuable for the post-production folks, keeps everybody on the same page with principal photography. Okay. As far as pitching goes, the Judd Apatow item that I had you guys check out, he talks about thinking like a pro, he calls it, and he gives you his tips for effective pitching in a meeting, in a pitch meeting to sell your story idea. His notions of the perfect pitch meeting are keeping it short, don't forget to sell yourself, describe your story in 3 minutes or less. That kind of goes part and parcel with keeping it short, I suppose. You should be thinking about how your story might be marketed, even if it's not your responsibility to handle the marketing. You should have you should have some sense, for instance, of what audience your concept appeals to, and how you might appeal to that audience for, to get them to watch your show or, subscribe to your show. You should outline the strong emotional underpinnings of your story, emphasize them. Whether that is the hero's inner journey or the hero's motivation behind their objective, or just the context of the story with which the hero and that specific hero's journey or objective exist under. Okay, so what's the prevailing tone or the prevailing atmosphere with which the story takes place. Make sure that you walk into a meeting with a sense of how your story will end. It's easy to get the ball rolling and get people interested in your ideas, but how are you going to culminate? How are you going to sum it up? How is it going to end? So he recommends that you have a strong idea of the beginning, middle, and end of your story or your series. And then, of course, get comfortable, get yourself centered, and try to have fun with this process. Don't be stiff. Don't be rigid. Try to look casual, like you've done this before, I suppose. And look at rejections in a positive light. They don't necessarily understand your project. Maybe they don't understand your story, or they don't relate to your characters. And then if somebody rejects your story, take comfort in the notion that had they taken on your story without a good sense or understanding of what it was about, it would be very easy for them to misinterpret what your message was and make the movie that you never intended, right? Which has happened before. And I think that I had you look at something from Vince Gilligan about the creation of Breaking Bad, and he talks about how he avoided that particular problem. There are also experiences, negative experiences by other writers who describe the nightmare scenario, the opposite of Breaking Bad, which was, you sell your idea to the studio, and then 6 months or a year later, they make the movie, and you go to see the movie at the premiere, and you realize that this is not the story that your book was about in the first place. So he's talking about getting used to rejection, and the notion that, if they don't get you and they don't get your story and they're not on board from the word go, that they're probably not the best buyer for your concept anyway. I think that's it in a nutshell. I tried to at least simplify Michael Hoag's story structure idea, the fact that there are 6 stages that can be sort of superimposed over the 3-act structure. Not as many as 12 like you have in the hero's journey, but at least 6 very rudimentary stages. And it's easy if you exclude the world setting and the aftermath from the 6 stages of story structure, and you map them instead over the setup, the point of no return, and the finale. Okay. A new situation or event, inner and outer motivation, 2 stages within the first act, excluding the world. The second act, complications and higher stakes, and characters recommitting to the goal. That's the middle. And then the end, the final push and the story climax that represent the finale in Act 3. So you can have the 6 situations superimposed over Act 1, Part 2, and Act 2, and then Act 3, Part A, or Part 1, right? And then the aftermath is what it is, right? And the world before the story began is what it is. So hopefully that simplified Michael Hoag's point of view of 6 stages of story development. I talked to you about the story structure architect at the beginning of this conversation. This is a really strong volume when you're looking for, if you want to get a sense of the character's total journey and what the story is about from beginning, middle, and end, that kind of runs part and parcel with your concept of the premise. The story structure architect, I think, is a real helpful volume. Like I said earlier, it takes 55 dramatic situations. It expands on the 36 that were based on classical Greek literature that were sort of analyzed and researched by Georges Polti. And it adds a female component to this. In other words, the major criticism before Polti got a hold of these concepts, which would have been in like the mid 1800s, I guess, the notion was that all of the supposed story structures were masculine based, at least in tone, and that they weren't exclusive of the masculine roles. In other words, females could be on the same story structure as a male, but that none of these dramatic situations necessarily represented a distinctive feminine point of view. And so that was where Victoria Schmidt added an additional 28 suggested structures to the overall and came up with a total of 55. The 55th dramatic situation being kind of an open-ended structure where you could add new ideas based on the evolution of writing and the evolution of characters well beyond the publishing of this book. And you could argue that, and I think she kind of alludes to it a little bit in the chapter where she's introducing the actual dramatic situations, where she says that there could be an emergence of a new concern over time that is not currently reflected in any of the story structure situations. And if you think about this day and age and the topics or the ideologies that are in the public sphere now, there could be dramatic situations that are racially motivated that aren't reflected in the original 36 or the subsequent 28. So there may be room to expand on these story structures in the future based on new, geopolitical concerns, social concerns that are sort of new to the dramatic process. Having said that, we return to the idea of the archetypes. The archetypes stem from Jungian theory, and I'm sure that you've all heard the name Carl Jung before. He's a famous psychologist, sociologist who studied the human psyche and specifically the notion of the significance of dreams, the Oedipus complex, and then the idea of there being archetypical characters within the structure of society who represent certain goals or certain objectives or certain belief systems. And he narrowed it down to 12 archetypes. And that's kind of the focus for the next few cells here, which brings us into week 3, where we discussed characters and character development. Okay. And I introduced you to a quick concept, and that was the who, what, when, where, why, and why do I care concept related to characters and character development. And I changed the meme from the beginning of the semester to content is king, and suggested to you that characters might actually be the currency of the realm at this point, especially with screenwriting, because as you may have learned through the process of exploring these theories and concepts, screenwriting can be at times very limited in terms of what it requires of the author in terms of defining the mindset of characters within the written document of the screenplay, not necessarily within contextual documents like character dossiers and Bibles and things of that nature, backstory documents, but certainly within the structure of the script itself. The script doesn't require that the author reveal how a character is feeling when they deliver a line. If you can't demonstrate it through action and infer it through dialogue, then we're supposed to leave that remaining translation up to the director and the actors through performance. So if your stories are fairly standard and they only evolve from a very small number of possible component parts, and you can't do a whole lot in terms of what you could do, for instance, in a novel in terms of describing a situation in full. If you have to reveal through dialogue and through action, the things that you can protect the easiest in terms of your intellectual property then are not your plots, but your characters. So content specifically in the broadest sense of the word is not necessarily the king as much as for a writer, the characters, because the characters are the thing that you can protect the easiest through WGA registration, through copyright registration. You can't copyright the notion of 5 guys rob a bank, but you can protect the idea that 5 guys wearing rubber masks of former presidents who robbed banks to fund their surfing expeditions around the world. That plot and those characters definitely are protectable through WGA and through copyright. Okay. So it's the way you create your characters and the situation you put them in that is really what's important. So I introduced you to this concept. All stories are what?
All stories are about who, what, where, when, how, why. Why should I care? Triangulation. What is it? I want it. You can't have it. This is the arc. I want the arc. You can't have the arc, Dr. Jones. This is the truth. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Character journeys. Feminine journey is about gaining power with each scene. Every scene, the female character gains power. There is power, 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 real power, and then there's the ultimate victory. Masculine journey is about loss of power. It's loss after loss after loss, and gaining the power to win over the villain. Dramatic plots, soap opera, on and on and on and on, episodic, big problem, solve it, and roller coaster ride, one action after another. What where now translates into problem, plot, character. When they all are equal, you get a nice piece of action.
So if I asked you which book on your bookshelf would describe to you in graphic terms the structure of your storyline or the structure of your plot, which book do you think would describe that point most succinctly? You need to look at the list again. Here's the list. Which of these books is going to help you identify graphically your plot and how it evolves through the beginning, middle, and end? Is it the grammar book? No. Is it the punctuation and grammar book? No. Is it the dialogue book?
The story, structure, and architect book.
Story, structure, architect, specifically. And if you look in there, you can pick pretty much any storyline, and it's going to show you graphically how to interpret that situation. Let me find one here for you. Here we go. So we have the roller coaster story structure. There it is, plotted graphically right at the bottom of the page. So the roller coaster concept applied to a plot gives you rise in action, rise in action, rise in action, resolution. And it represents each inciting incident and rising action as sort of equally weighted until the very end, which is the culminating act and resolution, right? So this book is not only giving you suggested plot lines and dramatic situations, but it's showing you how to interpret those situations. And it's giving you the visual reference that goes along with it to give you a sense of how your story is leading your audience through discovery, excitement, letdown, rising in action again, rebuilding their confidence, culminating in a climax, and then resolving in a sweeping final resolution, right? It's giving you a sense of how that plot's going to affect your audience and how they consume your story. So this is a really powerful volume. If you trust very few other books, certainly include the story structure architect in that. I think you'd be rewarded tenfold for your dedication. The writer's journey is defining the journey itself and giving you some context about what the character is going through in each stage of the journey. We talked a little bit about that. You had a couple of reading assignments from Vogler. And then we tried to apply it to a couple of interesting characters. So I introduced you guys to Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. He is the antagonist in that film. And I also introduced you to Sheriff Tom, but I also introduced you to the protagonist, Llewellyn Moss, from the same film, No Country for Old Men. And the point here was to try and get close to this character, understand what he represents metaphorically, understand what his possible objectives might be, and then how does he demonstrate those goals through his actions and his dialogue. And you get a fairly predictable character that becomes, I think, a little bit easier to write for when you understand that this character has a very narrow ideology, which is going to eliminate a lot of possible actions and lines of dialogue that would be uncharacteristic of this particular hitman. And it helps very much to understand him from the point of view of his antagonist's inner and outer journeys and what the opportunities are for this character to possibly succeed in the book or to succeed over the protagonist. And then we looked at Llewellyn Moss as the protagonist, kind of the tragic hero, really. And we also get I think from a strange point of view, we also might find ourselves in a weird kind of a way, a little bit rooting for Anton Chigurh in this sense, because the protagonist is a tragic hero, very flawed, makes a whole series of poor decisions based on flawed judgment, ends up dead in the end. So he doesn't really get his cited goal, or doesn't have it for very long. And so we can find ourselves actually, allying our concerns maybe with Anton over Llewellyn. And then Sheriff Tom is kind of riding a fine line in between the two of these fellas. Llewellyn is adapting to the world, applying his experience to what he perceives as a negative situation. Anton Chigurh is applying a very specific rudimentary ideology to everything that he can boil down to a black and white snap judgment like a coin toss. And then Sheriff Tom is riding in the middle, trying to understand the evolution between these two gentlemen, the evolution of the old world and the metamorphosis into the new world, the transition to the new world, and whether or not he has a place in the new world. So Tom is walking the fence between these two guys. And each one of these characters, we can learn and experience them and understand through their backstory what their actions are in the present tense of the script. And so it becomes, I think, a simple matter of taking the situation, placing the characters in these situations, and it almost at some point starts to write itself in a sense, because we already know how this guy's likely to react to a situation. And so he's going to have, again, a fairly narrow set of choices and objectives based on his attitude and his experience and how he's, the lens through which he's looking at his life. These notions, these details are things that can be researched, explored, and described in your character dossiers. And so we talked about character dossiers right around, what week was it? It's week 4, 3B4. In the character dossier, we cover things like what the protagonist's journey is, inner and outer, what the antagonist's opportunity is, what the basic premise of the story is, and we make sure that our characters, whether they are good or bad characters or supporting characters, are running complementary to our premise or to our story theme, right? And if they don't, we have to bring them around to agreeing with the themes and goals of the story, or we have perhaps misrepresented them in the text. If we get back to Jungian theory for just a moment, we have the notion that stories are based on traditions and that there are 7 story archetypes. We are told by Tobias that there's actually 20 master plots, but according to Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell's traditions, verbal and oral traditions, they maintain that there are 7 story archetypes: the rags to riches theme, the overcoming the monster theme, the quest, the comedy, the tragedy, the voyage and the return, or the rebirth, the phoenix, the rise from the ashes. And that these are the basic, the key archetypal themes in story writing. But Tobias says, well, there's maybe 20 master plots. And this is strictly a reference volume. So if you have checked it out, I don't recall giving you a reading assignment from Tobias at this point. But if you look at it, it is really a very straightforward reference in terms of he's got 26 chapters in here where he covers all of his master plots in fairly strong detail, right? And so if you were considering doing, let's take Jaws, for instance. What is Jaws? Jaws is the archetypal story of conquering the monster, right? Conquering the monster. We also had within the context of Jaws, from the novel point of view, we had Man versus Man, which was the notion that within the story and the characters' prehistories, that the sheriff's wife had an affair with the marine biologist, and the marine biologist was going to become a critical component in the sheriff conquering the shark. And so we had a parallel plot, a triangulation between Roy and the marine biologist and the sheriff's wife. We also had the adventure of going with Quint in the boat to find and kill the shark. And we have, well, that pretty much covers it, I think, from in here. Although you could argue that there's transformation, because not only do we get a world that becomes defined with danger and risk, to a world that is now free of its predatory antagonist, the shark. And so there's a transformation there. There's also a transformation in the relationship between the sheriff and the marine biologist. At the end of the movie, they become friends through their trials and tribulations. They learn to forgive and forget the past in order to team up and deal with the current situation, which is they had to kill the shark. So if you wanted to compare the story that you're writing perhaps to the master plots to see how you might need to tweak something, or how you could add something, or how, if you wanted to create interest in your story by devising a parallel narrative within the main structure of your story, have your main narrative and then have one or two parallel structures running within that main narrative. This is where you might want to turn to look at how you can take components of what you're working with and kind of twist them together to form new and interesting permutations of your actual story. And that was the notion behind and the value behind 20 master plots. So I think I can stop here around the 36 dramatic situations, which I gave to you as a PDF document for you to read and to download if you wanted to. The original 36 dramatic situations as described by Pulte. And what I've got is I actually have Pulte's 36 as a Xerox copy. And then I just put it in for a bookmark into my Story Structure Architect, because this book is based on the 36 dramatic situations from George Pulte. Okay. So it's like a continuation of that theory and a modification for the female perspective. So it becomes a really strong research volume at that point if you include both things. I want to leave it there for you, and just sort of open it up for some questions, because I've got another 20 some slides that I can cover with you guys on Thursday. And it's already basically 2:45. So in another 5 minutes, we'll be at our breaking point.
So,
yeah.
So are we expected to know like specifics of specific examples? So like the Anton Chigurh example, should we know like specific things about that?
Well, no more than what we discussed in class. So in terms of Anton Chigurh, he's a metaphor, right? We talked about that. I think I buried some notes beneath his. Yeah, I did. So we have Chigurh as the prototypical ideopath. In other words, he's right down the line. Either he's going to kill you or he's not going to kill you. And there's a few acute reasons why he would, and the reasons why he won't, he's really not concerned with. You either fall into the category of an offensive maneuver, word, or action, and then he applies his very limited black and white context to the solution, which is, if you screwed me over, you're going to die. If you get in my way, you're going to die. If you lie to me and my objective to find the thing I'm searching for, you're going to die. So in that sense, he's a very strict hardliner. He's an ideopath, and he demonstrates this sort of narrow psychopathic behavior in all of his actions in the movie. He's a purist. He's a metaphor that represents on a certain philosophical level, he represents death. So if you understand those things about Anton Chigurh, that's all I'm going to ask you. Other than that, you know, a lot of it is open to interpretation, subject to the opinions of the writers, whether the screenplay writers, the brothers, the Coens, or whether or not you're talking about Cormac McCarthy, right? So I just want you to know he's a metaphor. He's an ideopath. He has a very narrow line of performance in terms of dialogue and action. And it's based on a few simple black and white determining factors.
Makes sense.
Okay. I don't think that's complex. Does it sound complex? Because I don't
No,
want
I was just wondering in general if there were going to be questions like that on the midterm.
I think beyond anything that I just expressed to you, I think it would be more open to interpretation than actually, you know,
Right.
You know, specific, you know, quantity.
I guess the better way to phrase the question was, is the midterm going to be more theory based, or is it going to be like execution of the theory and examples such as the Anton Chigurh examples?
It's more documentary, straight up. Did we talk about this? If we did, was it A, B, or C? That's pretty much the way the quiz is structured. I'm not interested in you know, having you, you know, reinterpret or mix any of these metaphors for the test. I just want you to understand how we would analyze this guy. You know, who is he? How do we analyze him? What is our approach? What tools or concepts or theories might we apply to this character in order to understand him so we can write for him? You know,
got it.
Specifics about Anton Chigurh? No.
Got it.
Anything else? Anyone else?
I have a question. So I was wondering, you know how for our project, you said we're doing a midterm project, and then the final project where for the midterm you want like 15 pages. When is that coming up? Is that
at the most, right? So I think I said 6 to 8 for your TV project, because I was allowing for the possibility of a web series episode, which would be the smallest sort of representative idea of a television or broadcast script. And then your final project would be something resembling a dramatic narrative. And then I'm asking for a well-developed scene or series of scenes not to exceed, you know, say 20, 24 pages. Okay.
And is that for the midpoint or the final point?
Your dramatic situation is your final project. Yeah. In other words, a script is 80, 90 to 200, 215 pages, right? I don't want you to write 215 pages for your final. You don't want to write it in 3 months, and I don't want to read 30, 200-page documents to wrap up the semester. But you can show me a very successful, well-developed scene or sequence of scenes that demonstrates your writing ability, demonstrates that you understand the difference in narratives between a feature script and a television script. Show me your character performance through dialogue and action. If there's room for character development within the context of a very short sequence of scenes or pages, that would be great to see. I'm also, you know, in your final project, going to look at whether or not you have, you know, extensive formatting errors. If you have formatting errors after this semester and all of the supporting documentation I've given you and all the opportunities you've had to write something, then there's a problem. So I'm looking at the structure of your formatting, things like that in the final project. In this one coming up, I'm asking you to write it in the sense that you're writing for a TV show. Okay. So if you want to write your pilot script, or, you know, half of your pilot script. So a television show can be either 24 scripted pages for broadcast, or as many as 40, what did we say? 46, I think, for an hour long narrative broadcast, right? So half of 23 is what? 11 and a half, right? Or yeah. So that's why I'm saying don't write more than say 15, because 15 doubled would be 30 pages. And a script for a half an hour TV show is not quite 30 pages, because we know we have what? What do we have in a broadcast half hour
Commercials.
show? Commercials, right? So we only have like 23, 24 scripted pages for a half an hour broadcast to allow for commercial breaks, right?
So you're not expecting a full, like, complete story in the pilot script that's due for the midterm. You're expecting the first part. Like, we don't have to like reach a satisfying conclusion yet, because there is no, the episode isn't over, correct? Or would we be allowed to write a full like 22-page episode?
Yeah, well, yeah, that won't be so bad for the midterm, because I have time to grade it. So if you elect to go that route, the worst thing that'll happen is I'll grade you based on the first dozen pages, and then beyond that, you will have established a pattern. It'll be really more about curiosity for me. For instance, let's say you've written a 23-page script, and you give me the first 12 physical pages as a submission, right? That's half of the story. So in theory, if you were writing a half an hour episode for television and you gave me 15 pages, I should understand a great deal about your story within those 15 pages, because we know that within the first, we did an exercise, The Devil Wears Prada. In the first 10 pages of a 2-hour movie, we basically knew the setup, the world, the protagonist, the antagonist, what both of those wanted as individuals. Okay. We've identified the conflict. All right. We see the arc that the protagonist is on. Right. We learned a lot, and we understand who the supporting characters are and what they represent. So, and that's a 2-hour script. The first 10 pages in, we're really set up well to watch, understand, and enjoy that movie. Okay. So if you give me 15 pages of a 30-page document, I should know a lot about what's going on from those 15 pages. I should have a good sense of who your protagonist is, your antagonist, what they want, what their arcs are, their objective. What's the objective? What's the basic conflict? And tell me about the world that we're in. Okay. If you haven't done that, because really the television script, it's not the first 10 pages anymore. It's really like within the first, 5 to 8 pages, which is why I asked you for a 6 to 8 page document. Okay. And if it's if it's a webcast, it's only going to be maybe, 10 minutes of content anyway. So that script is very short to begin with. All right. But within the first 5 to 8 pages of a broadcast TV show, especially a half an hour TV show, I should have a pretty good sense of what's going on. If I don't get a feeling for that in the first 15 of your 30 pages of script, then you have a rudimentary storytelling problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm getting these page counts from. It's not really random.
So let's say for our final project, we have the idea of like an hour-long show that's about 45 pages of script. How many pages would you want for something like that then?
I think I asked you for what, 20 pages for your final, right? 20, 30 at the outside. But because if it's a 45-page script and you haven't made your point in the first 30 pages, then you have a problem with your script. Your script is back heavy, right? There's another, and that's the politically correct way of saying your script is boring if you haven't made your point in the first 30 pages of a 45-page script. Okay, because we don't know what's going on, what the conflict or the resolution is going to be for like 2/3 of your movie, right? That's a problem. You're going to lose your audience in the first 5 minutes if you don't tell them what's up. What am I watching? Because I could be watching the game, or I could be watching a rerun of this other show that I really enjoyed. Why am I watching your show? You got to hook me in the teaser, right? Which is like the beginning of Act 1. You got to hook me in your first 3 to 5 minutes. If you don't, I'm gone, right? So if you're writing a 200-page script, that's fine. but I don't need to read all 200 pages to know what's up. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else have any feelings about that, questions, or need to talk it out? Because I'm here for you guys. This is what I'm doing right now till 6 o'clock.
Yes. I actually do have, I guess, a bit of a question when it comes to a half an hour show, I guess,
Uh-huh.
in quotations. From I guess, aren't they usually like 23, 22 minutes, like on the regular, usually to like fit in the ad breaks?
And so if it's 23 minutes and I'm telling you that the average half an hour TV show script is 23 pages, what can you derive from that statement?
Well, if we're going by that, since if we're going by the page to minute like rate, then I'm guessing, those 23 pages would equal those 23 minutes.
This is a rule of thumb in the industry. It's not exact all the times. There's exceptions to every rule. Okay.
Yeah, I
But
guess I'm just like
a
reviewing it
page
over.
of script is a minute on screen is the rule of thumb.
Yeah, I'm just like reviewing it over since, because I know in other classes, I know if they like mentioned it, but like then after that, they'll show like a film that was like 60 pages and they somehow stretch it out to like an hour and a half.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other half of the joke, right? So in the business, we say a page of script is a minute on screen, and then the response is, yeah, but the chariot race was an eighth of a page, and that refers to the original movie Ben-Hur with Charlton Heston, where the scripted scene was literally chariot race, eighth of a page on the full script on the full screenplay, and the eighth of a page lasts for like a half an hour, 45 minutes. Right.
Huh.
So that's the joke, right? Because you're saying the rule of thumb is this, and then here's and then immediately the response is, yeah, and here's the exception to that rule. So it's like it's out the window, really, but no, not really. It's still fairly reliable. Okay. And that's what the assistant directors are using as a gauge to how to break down a script and determine how many script pages per day we're going to shoot during physical production. This is why we have page counts at all, is for the ADs to create a shooting schedule, right? So
Right.
that's what it all harkens back to. Remember, this is manufacturing, right? And you're creating a document that then another group of people have to manufacture a film from. Okay. So if we have a sense that a half an hour TV show is a 23 or 24 page script, right? And it's 3 acts. Okay. 24 divided by 3 is 8 pages, right? But then we've got a teaser, which is 3 minutes. So you're going to take 3 pages out of the first act and call that your hard open or your teaser, right? And then your first act after the first commercial break is the remainder, 5 minutes, anywhere from 5 minutes to 13 minutes, which is 5 plus 8 pages. You could get your next commercial to happen. And then you're going to 8 pages after that, you're going to get another commercial break, and then you're going to wrap it all up. Right. And this is so the ADs can figure out how many pages a day are we going to shoot? Well, back in the day when I was doing TV for a half an hour TV show, we were shooting on one series, 3 days was a production week for a half an hour TV show. That meant we were shooting 10 scripted pages a day.
Oh, wow.
And if you understand that 20 years ago, the average page count per day for TV was about 8 pages. We were running 2 pages faster per day than the average production.
Oh,
okay.
Quite the schedule.
Nowadays for TV, the average page count per day can be as high as 14 pages. But it all depends on the budget of the show. It also depends on the complexity of the effects that the story relies on, right? So in other words, you're not going to shoot Very Strange Things, or what's that one on Netflix, Stranger Things?
Yeah.
You're not going to shoot Stranger Things in 2 days. First of all, it's an hour episode, so it's going to be a minimum of 4 to 5 days. But you're not even going to shoot that episode in 5 days because of all the CGI that has to happen with that show. So that show's shooting schedule is probably an 8-day episode, right? So every
8 days an episode, yeah.
every 8 days you're on to your next episode, right?
Mhm.
As opposed to, I was just watching a brand new show with Kevin James called The Crew, which is his latest comedy on Netflix, and it's a half an hour TV show, right? So
Right.
each episode, well, for Netflix, it can be a 30-minute episode because there's no commercial breaks on Netflix.
Oh yeah,
right?
that's true. I mean, I've seen episodes that have
So,
like 34 minutes.
right? So it could be a full 30-page script, and because it's Netflix and because it's Kevin James, there's no CGI or anything. It's all on stage and maybe a little bit of location work, but it's mostly done in the studio. And there's maybe there's 2 or 3 principal sets in the storyline, and then they have some rotating sets. So 30 pages of dialogue divided into a 5-day shooting week is 6 pages a day. Bang, you're right on the leading edge of the sweet spot, right? 6 pages a day is a really comfortable schedule for a TV show. So that's probably what they're looking at. And it might even be shorter than that. Could be another 3-day wonder, 3 days per episode. And then they're back to shooting 10 pages a day. But if it's characters sitting in a circle talking about story within the context of a set, and there's very little to no CGI, and it's a lot of laugh lines, and a little bit of back and forth from the coffee pot to the boss's office, dolly through the walls kind of thing. So it's like one seamless set on stage to the center of the room, where we call it the kind of the ensemble sweet spot. Do you ever notice how, even like in shows like Friends, where there's like an ensemble spot where everybody kind of moves into that spot to do their little bit, and then they move out of it and somebody else moves into it. And in the case of the coffee shop, it was the sofa, right? So
Yeah.
somebody might have started or thrown a line from the coffee bar, but then they follow up by moving, and the cameras move over to the sofa, deliver that line. The other person comes in, reacts to the line. The original person leaves, and then this person kind of does their bit with somebody sitting on the sofa, and it all kind of revolves around this key position on the set, right?
Yeah.
When you're doing stuff like that, you can shoot 10 pages a day. It's easy. Right?
Oh yeah, especially with like such simple like camera movements and like
3 cameras, right? 3 cameras, wide, medium, and tight point of view, right? And you chop, live editing, straight to tape. You can do 10 pages pretty easily, but a feature works a lot differently. Usually in a feature, there's one camera, and it's getting all that coverage, and it's moving methodically through the content. Each set is shot out, and then you move to the next set, which might be on the next stage over, or you might go from on stage to backlot, or you go to on location, right? A feature has a lot more going on, and so the page count for a feature when you're in physical production might be very different than it is for television, especially live television. Okay, this is what this is all about, though. It's about the making of the sausage, right? So you're creating a script that then we're going to, from the physical production point of view, we're going to break that thing down into shootable bites, performable bites. The art department is going to decorate those bites. The camera department is going to shoot those bites. And so we're going to order film and order lenses and rent equipment based on how the ADs are going to say, okay, this bunch of bites we're going to do on Monday, and everything that has to do with this set we're going to shoot out before we go on location. And then we're going to end the week, because it might rain, we're going to end the week back on stage on this other set that they're not done building yet, that they're going to finish by the time we get back to the stage on Friday, and we're going to shoot out the episode on the next stage over on the new set. They're breaking it all down in that world, and they're going by your document and how you've structured your story.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What was it? I also have another question. When it comes to like specifically ad breaks, is there like usually like a standardized form of like going into an advertisement worldwide, or is it based on like specific country, or is it based on like a specific channel?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So like, okay, let's say, because like I know, because some shows like kind of break their ads, like, you know, like they actually like segue into like, you know, the fade out and it goes to the ad and they fade back in back to
Mhm.
the show with like with like the ad breaks, while like they would have those shows airing in like different countries, the same exact show, you know, probably dubbed, but then like an ad would just like go ahead and like break the pace in like the middle of like something going on. Let's say like it's you're in like the Philippines and you're watching like Friends or something like that on like Filipino TV, and like, you know, where like the usual ad break would be, it wouldn't like go like naturally go into like the ads. Instead it would be like in the middle of like Ross and Rachel arguing over something, and then it just adds straight in the middle of their conversation or something like that.
Right. Well, a TV show, it's going to structure the scenes to where there's going to be an obvious opportunity for a break, and it's going to come at the prescribed moment. So around the 3-minute mark, which is going to be around page 3, and it could happen as early as the middle of page 2 and as late as the middle of page 4, I suppose.
Mhm.
You're going to be looking for that comfortable break in the dialogue or in the action to where you can cut to commercial, right? And usually, because when we make the first 3 minutes and call it a teaser, what we're doing is we're outlining the world, and we are introducing the main characters and their conflict, and then we're going to commercial, right? So that we give you the setup, and then we go to our first obligatory ad spot, right? And so around page 3, there's going to be a real obvious place, probably in the dialogue, maybe in the action, to where you would want to cut here for commercial. Now, I could see where a conflict might come in. I remember in the beginning of the cable TV era, when we were adding channels to the previous sacred cows of network broadcast, right? So there was ABC, NBC, CBS, and then we added then we had PBS, which is kind of a different animal altogether, but NBC, ABC, and CBS, okay. And then we started adding cable channels, which were outliers. They were affiliates. Some of them were carrying the network feed and just rebroadcasting. Some of them were adding local content to that. All right. And so let's say they took an uplink of your half an hour TV show, but they were, I remember in the beginning, TBS used to be a network on cable, and TBS's claim to fame was they only interrupted your show at the top and bottom of every hour, right?
I
And
prefer
so
that, honestly.
and so that might create an issue if if you have these kind of manufactured spots where they're kind of supposed to go to commercial, but then they don't. But you could either take the air out of that spot, in other words, if there's a real pregnant pause and a lazy transition, like a cross dissolve into the opening scene of the next act, they might cut a little time out of that to get it to sort of happen a little more quickly in the transition, and then you could shoot the whole thing and have the first half hour free of commercials. That would involve a local edit, and that happens a lot. It used to happen a lot in television. Did you ever see the message in the beginning of a TV show that says this show has been edited for content to fit in the time allotted?
Actually, surprisingly, no.
Well, that's a pretty common disclaimer, okay, for television shows, especially on cable channels, right? This show has been edited for content to fit in the time allotted. And a lot of times it's because they're showing a 2-hour and 15-minute movie in a 2-hour network time slot. So they're actually chopping out 45 minutes out of a film like that to get it into 2 hours, or they're cutting it up into more commercial break potential to fill 3 hours of content. They're adding 45 minutes of commercial time to the final edit to show you a 2-hour and 15-minute movie, right? So what they'll do is they'll, where there might be some fairly clear points in the action or dialogue indicating a commercial break for a network show, they might start splitting those hairs evenly in between all of those to double the amount of time for commercials. From an hour, you've got how many commercial minutes? You've got 14 minutes per hour of commercials, that's 28 minutes in a 2-hour movie. But if it's fitting a 3-hour time slot, right, you need another, so 28 plus 14, you need 30, 42. It's 42 minutes of commercials for a 2-hour and 15-minute movie in a 3-hour network time spot. So they're editing it in weird places to add more commercials. And they do that a lot on, what's the one now where you can, is it the WB where seems like there's a commercial like every 5 minutes?
Oh, the CW.
Really? CW, right? That's really hard to watch a movie on that channel anymore because it's like there's a commercial every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't do this, because, you fall out of interest in the storyline because you're constantly being interrupted. You don't have a chance to, make an emotional connection with the plot or the characters, and,
Yeah.
it becomes a real drag.
Yeah. Oh, this was very interesting to learn with the different ad breaks and everything.
Yeah.
Seems
So,
seems-
but this is the difference between a TV show and a feature, right? So a TV show has the burden of advertising placed upon it. They have a very rudimentary production budget to get the thing made as cheaply and quickly as possible. And then they have to garner more revenue, or they have to recoup their production investment through the sale of advertising. And so scripted content for TV must allow for that ad revenue paradigm. Otherwise, it's not a sustainable industry. The feature industry is a little bit different. So they gather more of their pre-production and production budget prior to shooting, and then they have a separate post-production finishing budget and ad budget, and then they rely on box office to recoup their entire investment. So you don't have commercial breaks. Instead, you have, acts and stages of story and compelling storylines and engrossing characters and immersive visuals to get your audience really invested in your movie, so that they leave that movie really pleased with their experience, and then word of mouth or reviews compel even more people to go see this film, and then they make their box office numbers.
Yeah.
So feature writing is different theoretically, philosophically, and mechanically than television writing from that point of view.
Anyways, this is very, very interesting to learn about. Yeah.
So the way that you approach your storytelling in either one of those contexts is going to be slightly different, which is why I wanted you guys to give me a more of a dramatic narrative for your second project. But instead, what I have is folks that want to write, series and episodic installments and things. And so I don't want to impair their creative pursuit at this point, but I need to make sure that you understand the difference between the two styles of writing.
Oh, yeah.
As long as I feel like you understand the difference, I'm not hung up on what you write for me. I'm more concerned that you do it well and you do it with, creative emphasis. Cool.
Yeah.
I guess they left us all alone. So
Yeah.
I guess I'll wrap this up unless you had anything else that you needed to address at this time.
I mean, for the most part, I don't really have anything else on my mind. If anything, I'm just gonna focus on writing the pages for the pilot script, around probably 6 to 8 pages, like in the assignment said. So just gonna go ahead, focus on that, and then if I need any sort of help, like writing, like trying to, like, I guess, imply like an ad break or something like that, I'll just look up any of the PDFs that we have. Well, not PDFs, the books. But
well, either way, and if you go to the outline, which is why I give you guys the outline for the semester, in the getting started menu, here's your course outline right here. And I've been updating it as we go along, so that if there were things in my original outline that I haven't covered. I've edited the outline. So this should be fairly consistent with what we've done all semester. So if you wanted to know what the PDFs were from week 2 about pitches, you go to week 2. Here's week 2 right here, right? And you can see here's a PDF, how to write an elevator pitch, TV show pitch template, show Bible template, right? Then go to the module section,
Yeah, and then they
and
have all the
downloadable
PDFs there.
PDFs. Yeah, go to week 2. Here's week 2,
Oh, wow.
downloadable PDFs. And there they are, pitched show template, right? Copy of the TV show pitch from Studio Binder show Bible, how to write it, how to write an elevator pitch. Here's all your PDFs right here.
Alrighty.
Okay. Hopefully I've laid it out very logically so that if you want to get to information very quickly, if you're studying, that it's easy to access what we've done over the course of the semester.
Oh yeah. Well, anyways, I shall head out for the day. Hopefully,
Very
catch
good.
up on all my assignments.
All righty. And then next week, I'll pick up here around slide 28, 29, and we'll go through the last of this on Thursday. Okay.
Wonderful.
All right.
Right.
I'll see you then. See you next class period.
All right then. Well, see you next class.
Yes, sir. Thanks so much.
Have a good one.
You too.
Mhm.